an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Travelers, Season 1, Episode 11, Marcy. In this episode, it's a classic case of what happens if the person you love forgets you exist. And by classic, I mean, I hate this. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Michael for commissioning this episode. I am really startled when I created this new event. It says that the last time I covered Travelers was like the last week of January. So it has been a minute, and I was pleased that I actually had watched this episode already. I guess I watched it right after I finished last recording. So I was able to, there are times where enough time has passed that I'm like, I have to rewatch the old one. But I didn't feel that way with this one because I rewatched Catherine like 3 times. This episode, guys, is just brutal. I feel like we're really starting to get a look at more of the pieces and the logistics about how this all works. And it's making me more and more unsettled the more I find out about it. Hi, Hugabug. Hugabug's in the chat. So let's get this party started here. The opening of this episode is a series of cuts between 3 different situations. We've got this farmer or construction guy. He is a farmer, though. And he's doing something in his backyard. This is a guy we've never seen before. And most of the time when an episode starts off with a character that we don't know, they are a regular person who is about to be taken over by a traveler. And he is being intercut with Marcy, who it's at the time not entirely clear why Marcy is part of this sequence. But once we find out why these people are being sent here, it's perfectly obvious. It's just initially I was like, why does this keep getting interrupted by Marcy with David? For their part, Marcy and David finally had sex and they have woken up together and they're enjoying their first morning after having declared how they feel about one another. And this is too good to last. Something terrible is going to happen very, very shortly. And then there's also, the Grace, is it? Who is being, who is the teacher that Trevor likes, getting into her car, and Trevor is coming up behind her from the back seat to inject something into the side of her neck. And for a second, I was like, what's he doing? But then you see the time of death stamp at the bottom on her screen is different than the time of death stamp on somebody else's. So for a second, I wasn't paying a ton of attention and thought that time of death was still counting down from the original person, but she has a separate one. And then I realized, oh, right, Trevor said he saw someone he knew on that list, and he is trying to keep it from happening. Can we just talk about that for a second here? So, Grace Day. Thank you, Hugabug. If you all can tell me what TELL stands for as well. They keep talking about TELL, which I thought was time estimated longitude latitude or something. Because I think that's the acronym for how and when they're going to die and where. But I just want to talk about what Trevor's doing here, because pretty much this entire episode, or 2/3 of it, deals with Trevor trying to help Grace escape her fate. Now, I guess Trevor was under the same impression that I was, which is if you keep somebody from dying, if they're not at the proper latitude, longitude, they are just going to be impossible to take over. When Grace gets back in her car, though, after all is said and done, the traveler who has taken her over said they used voice recognition and GPS coordinates to jump in when she used her phone. I don't understand how they were able to adjust that quickly. And that I find really unnerving. I have been operating under the assumption that were something to dramatically change, the people in the future wouldn't necessarily be equipped to handle this sudden shift in events. And obviously, that is also what Trevor thinks. But somehow, they're able to zip on into her anyway using her cell phone. And I'm not entirely understanding how that can be. Like, it feels like they have to have somebody on the ground in the present who is reporting this back to them into the future somehow. And I don't know how that would be possible. How, like, the future can't have, I wouldn't think, access to her present day cell phone GPS records. So I don't, like, I wouldn't think, again, I just don't understand how this worked. Hugabug says, for them, it's not quick in the future. It has then happened a long time ago. If that were so, why wouldn't her tell be the spot that they wind up taking her from, though? Does she have two? Did they fake him out with one? Because they don't say that. They don't say, oh yeah, we knew you were going to do this. So they say we used voice recognition and cell phone GPS. How, though? How did you do that from where you are? You're using historical information. That doesn't really count as historical information. I wouldn't think. Like voice recognition. Is there, in the future, do they have every cell phone call that was ever made on tape ready to play back and figure out where it was coming from? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So this one, to me, kind of like has fucked with my understanding of how things work and makes it all feel a little bit less grounded, because I don't get how this is even possible. Their explanation doesn't cover the actual questions I have. So yeah, I don't know. I wanted to talk about that and of course talk about just poor Trevor, because he's trying to, like, she understandably assumes that he wishes her ill and that he is here to probably assault her, definitely probably kill her. If you are in her situation, there's no way you're believing this kid's fucking story. I mean, come on. And, like, he is a really privileged student who has an athletic background. This is a kid who I would definitely assume has an entitlement complex, has always felt he can get away with anything, and would definitely pull some shit like this and think that he's not going to get caught. So if I'm in Grace's shoes, I am 1,000% thinking what she's thinking, and the way that she handles the situation makes total sense to me. She is very smart about it. You know, she tries to talk to him. She tries to humor him. She tries to get him to draw out the time they're spending together to increase her odds of escape. She keeps on making it seem like she's just making smart suggestions that just make sense, and not, you know, because I think I can make an escape if we do it this way. And I just really sympathize with her in this, like, totally terrifying situation. doing her fucking best, and she almost manages to get away. She really comes close. I don't want her to get away, of course, because if she does, she's going to like report Trevor and say he abducted her, and that's bad for him. But nevertheless, I was still rooting for her because she was so smart about the way she handled everything. Let's see. MST says Trevor changed the future. They have a record of the original events in the future because of the historians they have already sent back, so the future adapted with his actions. Okay, I get but the thing is, they don't say that. They don't say we knew what was going to happen. They say we used voice recognition and GPS coordinates. And I don't understand, like, that doesn't feel like the same thing. Do you guys hear what I'm saying? It doesn't feel like the future, like, dealing with what he just did. It feels like the present dealing with what he just did. So did the present realize what Trevor did and put all of this information together in order for the future to use it? Is that what the suggestion is supposed to be? That somebody like did a voice recognition and a GPS check and was like, okay, future, we'll leave the original tell on the plans so that Trevor goes ahead and does this thing that he did. But we have this backup information to get her with, because if that's the case, they shouldn't need that anymore. It should be a second tell. They shouldn't need voice recognition. I feel like I'm talking in circles here, but this just doesn't, and this is part of my problem with time travel stuff, is that once I start trying to parse things, I confuse myself. And it's really hard for me to tell after a point whether something makes sense or if I'm just tired of arguing about it and I just gave up. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I mean, I will suspend my disbelief for this, but it feels like this isn't right. And I just wanted to address it. So we're getting the farmer who is fucking wrapped up in it. This is like a horror movie. This is like a Final Destination thing. He is using this like, post drill to drill holes to put posts in. I'm assuming he's like installing a fence or something. And he gets it caught around a length of barbed wire, and he turns it off and gets out of his car in an attempt to unwrap it, and it starts up again somehow. And I'm, not watching it at this exact second, so forgive me for forgetting how this goes. But he is trying to like walk away from it, and it gets wrapped around him, the barbed wire, and he begins to get dragged toward the drill, where I assume this barbed wire will eventually like crush him into the drill, which will like smush into his body, and that is how he will die. I honestly, this is such a horror show. Can you imagine finding this guy's body? Oh my God, what a fucking nightmare. It would be just lunacy. Hugabug says, I feel like once he changes it, the timeline splits off and the future is now different. It's hard to try and explain my understanding while typing on my phone and still trying to listen to you. I mean, I get that he changes things and the future is different. I just don't understand how they utilize that new future. I don't understand how the explanation they give about how they found her can possibly work with the logistics that we know of how this is like accomplished. But anyway, so this dude gets taken over just in time for this traveler to grab the wire cutters that are right there. And I guess this poor farmer forgot or was too panicked to think to grab the wire cutters in the original events. And I just feel so bad for him. But it's a great moment where the traveler stands up and looks around at this lush green landscape and is absolutely fucking elated. And I just keep forgetting what it's like for all of them to come into this reality versus where they come from. it is a real moment of joy and beauty that's like very touching to see, you know? And later on, we get the line about how he like didn't know what bacon was, because they're obviously like, they're vegetarians in the future. And it was all sort of like, in my head, it was due to lack of resources. I assumed that eating animals, like, you know, animals take a lot of food and space and energy. And I figured that was not an option anymore, and that they were like subsisting on some sort of like, you know, probably like a combination of hydroponic, like underground gardening that's like very basic, and food that is artificially created in a lab. And now, because he says that he started crying when he realized what the bacon was, I'm thinking, like, has just the attitude towards eating animals shifted that much? Is it now looked on as a sort of a barbaric thing to do? And it's more than just, we don't have the option. It sounds like if we had the option, we still fucking wouldn't, you know? It's interesting to me. So then we cut to Catherine, and she is, this is one of those moments. McLaren has made her some coffee, and it's just, the two of them capture so beautifully the day after a big fight where somebody was definitely in the wrong, and they know it. This isn't the day after when there's a fight that both of you kind of fucked up, or both of you feel dissatisfied. This is a fight that has a definitive, you fucked up. They know it. You know it. And McLaren is trying to like make it up to her by making a fancy coffee. And she is aware that's what he's trying to do. And she's accepting on the one hand that he's trying to do a nice thing, but also trying to be like, you just made a cup of coffee. This isn't really like your way out. I hope you know that. Man, relatable. There's just something, and it's a hard thing to like put your finger on, but that desperation of somebody trying to make it up to a person that they know they fucked up with is so embarrassing to witness. Like, you just, nothing you do is going to make up for it. Every little kindness is laced with you doing this because you want to make yourself feel better. And so it's just not going to mean the same things, you know? It's just rough. So he gets a phone call, and it's from David because Marcy collapsed and is in the hospital. And Catherine, like, her moment in this, I just love her so much. I love Catherine. I really do. She's got her back to him drinking her coffee, and she hears him dealing with whatever crisis again on his phone, and him saying, sure, I'll be right there. And she gets this look on her face and like purses her lips a little bit and raises her eyebrows like, I bet you will. And it's just such a fucking like, yeah, you made me a cup of coffee, so I guess you think this bought you points for you to go off and fucking do the exact same shit again. And he comes up to her and says, I'm sorry. And she says, you have your priorities. And he says, and you are one of them. And you see her look at him when he says that and want to believe him. But then he goes to kiss her, and she turns her face, so he kisses her cheek in this really awkward way. And just the whole interaction is just so awful, because he clearly, like, McLaren going through that memory thing, he has developed genuine feelings for her and has invested in this life now. Like, this is different for him now. And it sucks that he has just started to really care after everything has kind of gone wrong to a point that it cannot be recovered, you know? Sucks. So he goes out to the hospital, and Marcy is just like, first of all, she has to tell him what's going on. I completely forgot that nobody knows about the extent of the damage. Like, the only other person that knows is Phil. And he didn't say anything. So she has to tell McLaren that she's like been functioning in this body that isn't quite up to the task, and that she has done what she can to preserve it and extend the life, but it's obviously not going to be enough. He tells her that they're going to fix it, and she kind of is like, I don't know that that's possible. To which he says, you just helped to practically bring me back from the dead. Anything is possible. And I was just like, I really hope that you're right, sir. I really hope that you're right. And it turns out that he is right, but the cost is just terrible. So let's talk about Carly. All right, look. Get myself adjusted with my blanket here because I'm about to engage in some Carly bashing. Look, Carly's in a real shitty position, and I get it. I get it. But the whole way that she handles everything this episode, I just found so irritating. So I'm just going to boil it down to the two main points I want to make before I even get into like the play-by-play. Carly is spending a lot of her time dealing with a custody battle for her son, in quotes, her son, and putting a lot of energy into that. Now, she drops the ball by giving her kid to her boyfriend, baby daddy, to look after, and then leaving the kid there for a couple of days. And she gets the call from the social worker who's basically like, what the fuck? You, like, told me that this guy was a danger. You told me you would do whatever it takes. You made me be on your side, and then you fucking disappear. What are you doing? And Carly then, I said I would do my two main points before the play-by-play, but I'm just doing the play-by-play anyway. So what Carly decides to do is to try to trap her baby daddy, whose name I'm forgetting, Michael, is it? Into beating her up by insulting him on the street. And she tries to do this in a spot where there is a security camera, and he does not fall for it. At first, it looks like he might, but then he starts to realize that she's baiting him, and he gets smart and backs off and realizes what she's about to do. Now, I want to say, I get what she was trying to do here, and this guy is trash. When she says you're trash, I was like, oh shit, she just said that. 100% true. However, later on, she gets in an argument with McLaren about Marcy because Marcy is presented with the option of getting fixed but losing all of her memories of the 21st century. And understandably, Marcy isn't entirely sure that it's going to be worth it and that she wants to do this. And Carly kind of gets in McLaren's face later and says, you shouldn't have given her a choice. Because McLaren's like, I'm positive that she's going to wind up doing the right thing. And Carly's like, it shouldn't be up to her to do the right thing. She's taken an oath and she has orders. She should do that. And then says the mission is greater than the happiness of any one person. It's not about the happiness of one person. And he says, well, then what is it about then? And she gets mad and walks away. Carly, you have had multiple instances of this kid that's not actually yours getting in the way of missions. You have been at the detriment of missions occasionally, been in other places and been dealing with other shit that is 100% about your personal happiness and has nothing to do with the mission. But then you're going to come in here when she's going to deal with like the biggest decision of her life, probably. Basically, the difference between living and dying. And you are going to lecture him about how he shouldn't have given her a choice about doing this? Do you really expect me to believe that were you in Marcy's position, you would be cool with somebody just telling you, hey, this is what's happening, without actually giving you like any options and hearing out your concerns or any of this? Like, you are in the exact same mental frame that everyone else is, having gotten attached to a life that isn't yours in a way that's very real and very emotionally draining at times. And you are doing what everyone's doing in terms of trying to cope with that and deal with your mission as well. Don't you lecture anybody on how they need to just put the mission first and be dispassionate about that stuff. And then also, you know, talk about how you can't come on the mission because you haven't got a babysitter tonight. Like, you can't be serious. She's just so judgmental about this and so like accusatory in this way that makes it sound like she really doubts whether other people are as committed as they should be. And I'm like, Carly, you are in the same place, making the same choices and weighing the same like pros and cons of things. And it's not even down to something this drastic. You're dealing with everyday stuff and you're still occasionally having the mission either take a back seat or you are like, you know, having to like fit it in around your schedule. I don't know why you see that so differently, but it's the same thing. You just, for some reason, when it applies to you, when it's about your kid, it's just, that's how it is. But when it's other people and the people they care about, it doesn't matter. Grow up. You aren't the only person dealing with this kind of shit. It's incredibly self-centered, judgmental. You're acting really like sanctimonious about it in a way that's super gross. And if this were that important to you, just leaving your kid with this dude for days wouldn't like, you know? I'm real mad at Carly. I'm just like, I don't know if I'm supposed to feel this way about her, if I'm supposed to be like on her side or not on her side or what, but I just really have this like there's this edge to her that I feel like it's going to lead to her and McLaren just falling out, because the two of them have been, you know, they have been romantically involved, and she has basically been put into the body of somebody who isn't in a relationship, but he has a wife. And it's clear that it's a little bit like difficult for her to see him off with his wife, and not see him, but, you know, to know that he's going home to somebody and going to bed with somebody. And I just think that this is going to lead to them growing apart finally, for real, because he's clearly gotten more attached to Catherine since everything happened. And the fact that she is behaving this way, Carly, and seems to have very little like sympathy for people who are growing very attached to those in their lives of the host. I think that's going to bother McLaren, because he has started to grow very attached to somebody in his host's life, and he's going to start to feel like Carly just doesn't get that. When she does, it's just a child rather than a romantic relationship. But Hugabug says, I think it's because she thinks she's putting the mission first, and that is the reason she's losing custody, because she left him with Jeff for the mission. I mean, I guess, but the only reason that I don't feel that's what happened there is because it wasn't like she kept being like, I need to get my kid. She wasn't walking down the street being like, I'm about to go pick him up. I really need to hurry. It felt like she completely forgot about him until she got the call from Jacqueline. And then all of a sudden she's like, oh, I'm heading over there right now. I'm like, bitch, you weren't. You forgot. Admit it. You know, like you forgot. You just did. And I feel like she's trying to paint this as her making this like sacrifice. And it isn't really that she decided to make the choice to give up custody for the greater mission. She just kind of fucked up by accident, and she's trying to act as if that was like a conscious choice, and it wasn't. So yeah, she's just like, I think she's just trying to recontextualize things to make herself feel more virtuous and more responsible. And she's not. This is a result of her being irresponsible. Anyway, so McLaren gets his first order in the hospital to greet Traveler 0014 from this little kid. And when he goes and tells Philip that's their mission, Philip is like, wow, wait, 0014? And apparently the lower your number is, the more important you are. So I'm guessing original like founding members of this like whole project were given their numbers first, and many of them are still around. And the later on you were added, the later number you have. So if you have an earlier number, you were probably one of the like original members. Maybe it's different. Maybe, you know, maybe people are given 5 digits if they're one of the travelers. They're given 3 digits if they're such and such. They're only given 2 digits if they're part of like the absolute critical team or something. But I don't know. I got the feeling that it was because you were an OG. So Philip and McLaren each have to go to 2 different locations because there are 2 potential places that the traveler could wind up being. And Philip goes to the spot where Grace was going to have died at that corner. And we see like a crane lifting a pallet of like cement bags and everything. There's a break and it crashes to the ground. And that was going to be what killed her, but she isn't there. And he starts to realize where Trevor probably went. He begins putting 2 and 2 together. Meanwhile, McLaren, he has gone to this other spot and he's watching this. He doesn't even know what's about to happen. He just knows somebody dies here, I think. I'm not sure if he knows how. But there's a dude who's about to get hit with a cement truck. And we watch it. It's rough, guys. Like, this dude is just on his phone and does not see it happen. And McLaren, as soon as Phil tells him that he thinks Trevor has interfered, he turns away and says, fuck, okay, you look for Trevor. I'll work on a backup plan for Marcy. And he, I guess, assumes that this guy being hit the way that he was, that means that a traveler didn't arrive, right? Because if that dude would have screamed, stepped back, not have. So I guess that was his answer, is coming to see a guy who just died, and that was all he did. I feel like that's a really bummer way to spend your day. So yeah, they assume that since this other person isn't there and didn't die the way they were supposed to, something else is going on. So McLaren goes to talk to this cop again. I love this, Officer Boyd, that he keeps on behaving as if he doesn't know. And I have to think that eventually this is going to be the person that his wife thinks he's cheating with. I feel like that's coming because this is somebody that he keeps on behaving as, oh, what's your name again? In this really kind of way that's like, people are going to start to recognize her and remember that you've been seen with her before. Like, there's only so many times you can do this. But he begs her to be a second opinion on Marcy's behalf. She tells him that she's their medic because he says, can't you just ask your medic? And she's like, you're talking to our medic. And he's like, wait a second, but you are the leader of the group though. And she's like, yeah, our medic died. That happens. One of us had to do something. So guess what I'm doing? So he gets her to agree to help, and he gets David to get Marcy out of the hospital. And poor David, I love him so much, but he's such a little pumpkin. He agrees to help, but he doesn't, of course, like have the full story about what's going on. And he keeps trying to do as much as he can while still like accepting the fact that he won't be told the whole truth. And he's trying to be cool with the fact that he won't ever really know the whole truth, because he knows that that's part of like the deal of, that's part of the deal. But he doesn't really know how much it's okay for him to ask or to know. So there are times where he's accepting them, telling him very little, when maybe he should push back a little bit more and be like, no, I need more details on this. And so this leaves him in the position later where they have Marcy somewhere else and he doesn't know what's going on. Nobody has updated him, and he put his like ass on the line to sneak her out of the fucking hospital, and nobody has decided to like fucking get in touch with him and let him know what the hell is going on. And I just really feel for him in that respect, because I'm somebody, I have a real respect for authority in situations like this. I would definitely be the way that David is, where somebody official comes in, the person that I'm like, involved with tells me, trust this person, I'm working with them, yada, yada, yada. We're doing something super top secret and official and dangerous, and you can't know everything, but I promise XYZ is true. I would definitely err on the side of not asking enough questions, I think. I would probably be overcautious. I wouldn't want to make it look like I was prying or trying to get too much information. And it would just result in probably me getting taken advantage of or treated like this, where I'm an afterthought. I don't feel like he was like taken advantage of. It's just that McLaren's busy and David can wait, and I just really sympathize with David for being on like the outside of this and not really knowing what the fuck is going on. So the doctor gives a, second opinion and says that, there isn't much that she can do. They talk about nanites and whether or not something can be done to like rebuild the parts of her brain that are fucking like ruined. And the Boyd says there are a number of medical traveler teams capable of amazing things, but they take orders from the director. The director isn't going to come over here and fix her on a whim. And it turns out that's not quite true, but it is going to be different than what they expected. McLaren asks how long she has, and Boyd just says not long. The shot I gave her should help her feel more or less normal for a little while, but her neurons are still going like fireworks. If the director wants her saved, and just sort of trails off, and McLaren's like, yeah, okay. So they just have to sort of hope that's going to be taken care of. And it is. That is the person who comes through on Grace's body. And it's really funny to watch Grace like figuring out how to turn the car on and how to drive. This is all shit that they've never done that they just have to adjust to. I really like when I talk about logistics, this is the shit I want to know. I assume that in the future they have a like fleet of little stations they've built that are an approximation of what it's like to drive a car. And they have, because there's no reason to be driving. I'm assuming they don't do that. But they also have some other amazing technology medically. So I don't know what they can do and what they're capable of. And I just love the idea of like having to take like a driving test, but like not really. Yeah. So they were sent to Messenger this morning. By now they should have his coordinates. Call him right now on speaker so I can hear both of you. So Trevor calls McLaren and explains what I did. And, you know, I'm sorry. I felt like I had to do something. And McLaren is just, you broke protocol. So McLaren is real confused because they are supposed to go and greet a traveler that has already gotten here, which they don't understand. That's supposed to be what you go and do, is go to these coordinates and deal with this. And this person is like established. They don't understand that they're supposed to be bringing Marcy with them, but soon that becomes clear. And they go to this dude's place. It's pretty great. He answers the door and he doesn't obviously recognize Grace because she's in a different body. But when she begins to shit talk him, he immediately knows who she is. And it's a pretty awesome moment. I just really like this. 027. I'd recognize that tone in any century. So she comes in and they're about to work on some shit together because they are both hackers and programmers. He wrote a backdoor hack that a faction in the future is desperate to get their hands on. A faction. A group is trying to topple the director and they want to use my code to do it. I came here to hide it, so it's useless. I want to know all about that, and it bothers me that Trevor does not press the issue and ask more questions about that. Please inform. I feel the director is not to be trusted. I don't know anything about this director, therefore I do not trust them. I agree with the faction for now. And when Grace says, I'm trying to save somebody's life, both Ellis and Trevor, when she says, is that so hard to believe, say yes. In a way that genuinely seems to hurt her feelings a little bit. You see her expression, like she's been very sardonic and quick with a reply and a rebuke or whatever. But when they say that, she kind of looks like she doesn't know what to say. And there's a moment of me being like, so what's your deal that they are reacting this way? Like, why do they both behave as if it is so out of the question? And he asks her, how's my code going to save a life? And she says, you'll see, and don't worry, I'll destroy it as soon as I'm done. I don't know if I believe that's going to happen, but I guess we'll see. So Trevor gets sent to go make dinner, and McLaren and Phil pull up with Marcy. And Carly is also here. My bad. And Carly is planted in front of the computer and made to like look at the screen while these numbers flash, which turns out to be what the programmer calls a calibration of some kind. And it's weird. Like she looks like she's almost been sort of like hypnotized for a second. And the programmer doesn't exactly tell her what it is that they are looking for or figuring out. They just sort of say as little as they can and then move right along. So we get this wonderful sort of dinner scene with all of them. And they're just eating like tons of vegetables, it looks like. I don't think I see any meat on the table at all. But I might be mistaken about that. I just like, from where I'm sitting, I can just see like ears of corn, bowls of salad. They're all drinking orange juice and carrots, potatoes, squash, all this stuff. It's really like that they are just enjoying fresh food so much. So the whole thing with the coronavirus has impacted us in the US for sure. But I don't feel like we quite get what it is like for some people overseas. And I have a friend right now who lives in the UK. And I didn't realize that the UK gets most of their produce from Europe. And because of the issues they've been having, and a lot of it comes from Italy specifically and France, they have got no produce coming in. And they're going to the grocery store and there's like some meat and there's like canned stuff, but there's nothing fresh. And I'm really like, it made me realize I'm going to Sam's Club and buying bags of avocados and things of salad and bags of apples and whatever. I have access to all the same stuff as usual, except for toilet paper. That's been the one thing that's been hard to find. And I'm sort of like worried that this is going to begin to happen over here. And I called her the other day and she was crunching on something. And I was like, what do you got? And she was like, an apple. And she said it with such excitement because she hadn't had like fresh produce in like weeks. And, this moment really reminded me of that. So they're having this kind of sweet dinner moment, but it is interrupted by this programmer in a very dispassionate way saying, I made a mistake and I found a code that will bypass the damaged areas in your host's brain. And she's saying this with this very like smug expression of just like, am I a genius or what? And to be fair, the other programmer is quick to be like, it's fucking brilliant, honestly. Like they agree with her. And Trevor says, how does this process not lose information? And she says, oh, it does. Of course it does. And everybody sort of stops and stares at her because she, again, is being really cavalier about this. A few memories, some life experiences will be lost, but the human mind is full of useless things. You won't even be able to tell the difference. And Marcy says, well, what about my memories of the 21st? And she looks at her like she's kind of an idiot and says, well, obviously none of that. I didn't have access to it, did I? And you see all of them, like, who are not these two programmers, take a deep breath and realize, like, this is going to be a huge bummer. It's going to be as if she didn't perform these other missions with them. It's going to be as if she doesn't really know them. They aren't even thinking about David yet because they don't realize how important David is to her. Maybe McLaren does, but nobody else does. And yet this programmer is blissfully unaware of how affected everybody is by this news. She thinks she's delivering 100% good news and is very proud of herself for having figured this out. And the rest of the team is just like, seriously? And she doesn't understand it. She's just like, you should be applauding me for this. And you should be super grateful that you now don't have to die. What's the matter with you? And I'm like, man, you just really do not understand the bond that these people have, do you? So we go to the conversation between McLaren and Marcy, where he asks her if the thing with her brain had ever been a problem for the mission. Because obviously, if she had withheld this, and it was something that could have potentially backfired on all of them, she might be held responsible for that. And he says that he says, what kind of asshole would I be if I started yelling at you now? And then sort of assures her, after this transition, we'll tell you everything you need to know. But she's like, I mean, I understand that you'll try, but everything is different. I am a different person. And there are things that you won't be able to tell me. You can tell me about events and about missions and things that we did, but I won't have gone through them. And you can't tell me about David. And I guess they try, but because she says, I hear we're close, when she sees him again. But yeah, she's like, she won't be me. She'll be a copy of me, but she won't actually be me. And she says that she wants some time to consider this, but Grace really doesn't want to hear it. Grace is like disgusted that Marcy is even considering not taking her up on this offer. She created this whole, backdoor coding thing. She traveled all the way to the 21st to do it. She is basically accomplishing something nobody thought was possible. And Marcy is out here telling her she doesn't even know if she wants this. And Grace says, you have taken an oath. You have a responsibility. And tries to tell her turning this down isn't even an option. McLaren steps in and is like, I think it is an option. And she just asks for some time to think it over. It's important that I see somebody before I make the decision. And Grace says, fine. She just, I think, assumes that Marcy will make the right choice once she gets down to it. And decides to sort of let it go. And it's just, this programmer just really does not understand what it is that she's telling them. Like, she just has no sympathy for what this is going to be like. They have done some huge shit together. They have lives, I don't think that they understand that part of things. So there's a moment here where we see David and he's talking to this homeless guy behind a building. I am not sure if I'm supposed to know, is that one of his clients? I don't know if they're clients. Patients, I guess. I don't know what he's doing there, but regardless, Marcy texts him that she's coming home, intending to talk to him about this, but he isn't there when she gets home, and they have to wait for him. And this all begins to go down before he has even gotten home. So she goes to make some tea. She's looking real gray. Things are obviously that shot sustained her for a bit, but not enough. Fucking Carly is real cranky and argues with McLaren about this whole thing. And you can see McLaren starting to think that maybe Carly is the one who doesn't get it. And I'm starting to think that is true. And then we hear Trevor, and he says, I have a unique perspective on this. In the early days of testing the technology, my much younger consciousness was transferred out of my body and back again. And I am soups curious about that and what that's like. I mean, obviously, Marcy says that's not the same thing, and it's not the same thing. But it's interesting that they are able to do that. My point is, I was still me when I returned. I didn't feel any different. And Marcy's not really worried about feeling different. That's not the problem that she has, is that she won't feel any different. She won't know. It's about the not knowing. It's about being unaware. It's not about coming back into your body and being like, this isn't right. It's about being so completely ignorant of the changes that it feels almost like your free will has been taken away from you. I get it. Nobody else really, I'm not sure if they don't get it or if there's just nothing to be done and they know that there's nothing to be done and they're just trying to make the best of it. I think that's probably it. And Philip tells her that, you know, he wants her to go through with this because he just doesn't want to lose her. So yeah, they're all trying to like be respectful of whatever it is that she decides, but they all clearly want her to do this. So she starts to say, I need to talk to him. I need to sit down and figure this out. And we see recorded time of death, 10:39. And she begins to collapse. And the ringing in her ears begins. So they decided to tell her that she had time to decide, but to go ahead with it anyway. And you can see everyone around her looking at one another with this like knowing, of course they just decided to do it. Of course they did. Like they're not surprised. For a second they were, and they were just like, they're like, what's happening? But it only takes a moment before they're like, those fucks. Like you could just see it all over their faces. She comes back to herself with her fists up because she is thinking she's coming back into the present in the moment that we saw her come into, where she's being beat up by a gang of dudes on the street. And they have to explain to her that things have changed and that this isn't her original tell. And, you know, basically calm her down and try as best they can to tell her what the fuck is going on. And then David comes home. And she's sitting there seeming like she's just herself and doing so much better. And you can see him kind of like breathe this sigh of relief. But then she looks up and just doesn't recognize him. You can see on her face that she doesn't, there's no emotional reaction to the sight of him. There's no relief. There's no flare of affection. There's just this sort of indifferent, oh, hi, you're the one. And it's really rough to see his face when she says, you must be David. I'm told we're close. And she's trying to be as polite as she can. But he has this like, you know, he doesn't understand. And I would assume if I were him, that this was a result of like amnesia from her brain having trauma, which might be exactly how they explain it to him. But this is rough, you know, and I think that they will probably grow to care about one another again. Well, he cares about her either way, but I think she will grow to care about him again. But, you know, losing that, all of the history of what they've gone through together, that's really tough. Yikes, you know? So that is the end of the episode, y'all. And it's such a bummer. And like, I totally understand why they lied and said, yeah, sure, you can have some time. But damn, cold-blooded shit. I wonder if Grace, like, I'm assuming they can't go back to the future again. This is another thing that I've sort of like assumed. So if Grace came back here to fix her, I'm just realizing if they can make copies of consciousnesses, is Grace like in the past still also? Is this a can there be multiple copies of the same traveler around? Is that, oh man, that didn't even occur to me that you can basically like store somebody's consciousness on a hard drive and send out different versions of them like multiple places. I don't see why you wouldn't do that because it's efficient. After you train somebody and invested that kind of like time and energy. And there's some interesting stuff that comes up too. I meant to bring this up. When Trevor's talking to Grace in the woods, she asks why, if you fuck up a mission, don't you just go back and redo it? And he tells her that that is actually impossible, that there is something about not being able to do do-overs, that they can only go back as far as the last arrived traveler. So they can't just jump back further and do something over again, which is a really interesting wrinkle that I appreciate, that there isn't just this unlimited bouncing all over time. And that definitely gives things like a stricter parameter to work within. And I like that. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap up, but thank you again, Michael, so much for commissioning this episode. Thank you very much to MST and Hugabug for being in the chat and talking me through some of this. I apologize if I've really misunderstood something and you guys were yelling at me about it in the beginning of the episode, but I'm open to hearing things. I just don't really understand, I think. So let me know. And I will be seeing you all again, hopefully pretty soon, with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.